Recently on this channel I reviewed the second book from Conversation Tree Press, which was FAUN by Joe Hill in its standard and deluxe states. Now I have received on loan this review copy of the more exclusive lettered state so that we can take a look and see what kind of upgrades we get when going to this state of the book. The first upgrade is in the enclosure, so instead of a slipcase we now have this Solander box which is covered in this linen cloth with this warm grey marl appearance to it. It's a nice feeling cloth. The top, bottom and four edges of the box are covered in a brown cloth, and the only other exterior embellishment is that there is a brown leather title label inset on the spine of the Solander box. Now, opening the box, the interior is a relatively straightforward affair. So the inner faces here are covered in this grey suede-like material. Here we see the book itself. I will put that aside for just a second. And then running down through the spine of the box, we have this marbled paper with these green tones to it. And I'll comment a little bit more on that in just a moment. So a fairly simple affair for the Solander box. It feels again very well made, as I've come to expect from Conversation Tree. And I do enjoy having a Solander box rather than a slipcase. Now for the book itself, we receive this chemise, which again is covered in that linen cloth, and it has been stamped here on the front board with this line drawing of a skull with horns. If we flip it over, we have a very similar design on the rear, and we see here on the spine of this chemise the title blocked in brown, FAUN. Why should we need a chemise when the book is presented in a Solander box, you might ask? Well, opening the chemise reveals the answer. And within is the book itself. It is fully bound in this brown goatskin leather. It has a nice visible but even grain, and it's striking that the leather feels very soft to the touch, so it feels like quite a luxurious leather. But then the most striking thing of all about the binding of this book is that adhered to the boards, we have that same design of a horned skull, but that's now being cut by laser out of mica stone that has been stuck onto the front board of the book. And if we flip it over, also again onto the rear board, so we have this wraparound presentation. That's an interesting design choice because this stone, in the way that only stone can be, is quite cool to the touch. It has slightly sharp edges about it, and so it makes, when you're holding the book, for a very striking contrast against this nice luxurious soft leather, to have this hard unyielding stone. And I think that's quite thematically appropriate for the book. It's a reminder not to get too comfortable because there are dangerous things lurking out there. Other than that binding, again on the spine we have the title in gilt, again in that same delicate face that we saw on the chemise. The top edge of the text block has been gilded. We see here that we're going to have this ribbon marker, and the foredge and the bottom edge are both with a natural decal. So that is the exterior presentation. Now let's open the book and have a look inside. And we first arrive at end papers that again use that same marbled paper that we saw on the spine of the Solander box. And this I think is a really nice example of marbling. So the inks that have been used are metallic. They catch the light in quite an interesting way. And there's also a nice variety of tones here, from light green through to dark green, and including these coppers and dark blues and reds. Altogether, it's a visually interesting example of marbled paper that I quite enjoyed. Breezing past the end papers, next we have bound into the book this original drawing by the book's illustrator, Francois Villancourt. It was advertised as a remark, but I think it's a little bit better than that because it's really a full-page original drawing, and it's nice to have that bound into each copy of the book. And then the paper of the book proper is a new stock that we haven't seen before. It is a handmade paper from Gangolf Ulbricht, And this is really probably the highlight of the state for me. It's a very tactile paper with a wove finish. It feels nice and pliable. It has a pleasant texture under the fingers, and altogether feels like a luxurious paper. And then here we have the title page. It follows the same basic design as the standard and deluxe states, but there are a couple of changes to comment on. The first is that you may have noticed already that the book has undergone a size upgrade for this lettered state. In fact, the standard and deluxe states were half the size of this much larger lettered state, and so that allows this title page to breathe and take advantage of that extra space and makes the book altogether more impressive and imposing. One way that that extra space has been used is that these line illustrations by Francois Villancourt, which were printed letterpress from plates, have now seen an upgrade. We can see a lot more intricate detail in these illustrations than we could see in the standard and deluxe states of the book, which is not to say those states were in any way problematic, but you can really spot the extra detail here once you know to look for it. The other change we see is that there's an extra line here informing us that we're now going to have decorative capitals by Svetlana Molchenko, and we'll see examples of those in just a moment. So we turn into the book. On the reverse, by the way, of this title page, we can see already that there's a bit of a bite to the printing. Just like the other states, this book has been printed letterpress by Nomad Letterpress, and the printing, as one would expect, is quite superb. Here's another of those line drawings where I think you can really see, if one does a side-by-side comparison, the extra detail in the wooden planking here and so on. Next we see another upgrade for this lettered state, the colour illustrations by Francois Villancourt. We have the same illustrations, but now they're tipped in onto this fibrous yellow paper. Again, it's a very nice tactile paper, and I think the fact that the colour plates have been tipped onto that means as we're turning the pages, we're handling this nice yellow paper rather than this paper which is a little bit glossy. That glossy paper does a great job of showing the colour illustrations off, but it's not so pleasant to handle as this more artisanal stock that we have here. And then here on the recto leaf, we see the first of those designed drop caps. It's printed in red, which I think connects really nicely with the red printing that we also saw on the title page of the book. And there's a nice bit of embellishment there to make this look a little bit more interesting. So that's all there is to report about internal changes, really. I will leaf through and we can see a couple of examples of those illustrations presented as tipped in plates. So one thing you will have seen if you watched my review of the standard and deluxe states is that the two parts of this book mark a pretty dramatic transition in tone, and that has also been marked in the design of the book by including this sheet which is copper on one side. It has this very fibrous texture on the other side, and so we have this physical barrier that represents the character's progression through a physical doorway in the book, which is a nice touch. And because the book is much larger in this lettered state, we have a correspondingly larger sheet of that paper here in the book. There's another of these line drawings, again, now looking very intricately detailed. And here is the second of those designed drop caps, and we see we have this dark ribbon marker in the book. And then we arrive here at the colophon page. It has been signed by the printers from Nomad Letterpress, by the illustrator Francois Villancourt, the author Joe Hill, and by the binder at Ludlow. So a real collection of signatures there. And that brings us to the end of the book. Again, we have that nice marbled paper. So that is FAUN, now in its lettered state from Conversation Tree Press. Just like we've seen in other states of Conversation Tree books, we have really across the board upgrades as we go up through the scale of states. This edition is no exception. So we went from a slipcase to a Solander box. We had the chemise as a new inclusion. We have a full leather binding with this adhered mica stone in an interesting design. We had really nice end papers, the most wonderfully tactile paper for the text block, new colour printed drop caps, higher resolution printing of the line illustrations, a new way of presenting the colour plates, and that's before we even mention the increase in the overall trim size of the volume that makes the whole book look more impressive. So there's a clear step up in price when one goes to this lettered state, but I feel like those who opted for this state have gotten their money's worth in upgrades. Altogether, another nice example of work from the Conversation Tree Press, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of the press next.